You know how every year we get new free-to-play shooters popping up, battle royale games, tactical shooters, survival games, and some games launch very strong, get tons of players, but ultimately due to many different reasons, whether it's lack of updates, tough competition, or just bad timing, they just slowly faded away. So in today's video, we are taking a look at 10 of these awesome free-to-play shooter games that once were buzzing with players, but now in 2025, they are just hanging on its last breath. So let's jump in and see which games made the list, and do you guys remember or play any of these games back in the day? Let me know down in the comment section. Or I'm starting with World War III, a modern-day free-to-play military first-person shooter originally launched back in 2018. And they initially launched this game as a paid title, but it never really clicked with a lot of people. Then afterwards, they kind of removed the game on Steam. Then they decided to release the game back again on Steam back in 2022, but this time as a free-to-play title. And initially, the people were super hype about the game. It got a lot of attention as a potential Battlefield killer, because at that time, the Battlefield 2042 was a complete mess, and the community was eager for something more grounded and tactical. And World War III kind of had that realism, hardcore vibe going for it. It got some real world locations like Moscow, Berlin, and Tokyo, plus realistic ballistic and insanely customizable weapons and loadouts. But underneath everything, there were some massive issues going on with the game. People really couldn't get into the game at launch. There was tons of issues with the servers, server stability, hit registration. Then after the launch, the update became very slow. There were any major new updates, new game modes, maps or anything like that to explore. Then ultimately the player base kind of gradually drifted away. Afterward, they tried to fix most of these issues, but it's already too late. But now in 2025, the game is actually trying to make a comeback with a new development team. You can still download the game, play the game, but remember there is only about 100 people playing on Steam right now. Alright, our next game is a game called Vigor. It's a free-to-play looter shooter set in this post-apocalyptic Norway and developed by Bohemia Interactive. The game first launched on Xbox Early Access back in 2018, then eventually expanded to Nintendo Switch and PlayStation, and finally made its way to Steam back in September 2024. Most of us PC gamers probably never heard about this game before, but it was actually a pretty successful free-to-play game on consoles. The core idea behind Vigor is pretty neat and simple. You drop into encounter as an outlander, scavenge resources, gear up, and try to survive long enough to haul it back to your shelter. And your shelter itself can upgrade and craft better weapons, goodies for your next ride. So it's got that satisfying looter shooter gameplay loop. When it hit consoles, it was actually pretty well received and even hitting a 1 million player at a certain time. But on Steam, the game has landed with mixed overall ratings, just about 4 to 6% positive reviews. It was a pretty good game back in 2019, 2020 or so, but I feel like it's a bit too late for a proper PC release. And they try to combat that with a new seasonal update and content, but it never really clicked with a lot of the players on PC. Technically, you can still download and play the game, and right now on Steam, the game is having about 135 people playing. Hopefully, the game is still going strong on the console side. Alright, next up we got one of the coolest games to come out in 2025, and that is none other than Mini Royale. The game initially launched onto Steam as an early access title with a decent concurrent play count, but nowadays, well, it's not looking so good. Anyway, it's a free-to-play battle royale where you hop in as a green army toy soldier, duking it out in this massive kid's bedroom. You get fast-paced game modes like the Battle Royale mode, Classic Deathmatch, and Color Conquest. On top of that, you got some cool traversal mechanics like grappling hook, sliding, and climbing furnitures. Honestly, an awesome little game with a very cool concept. But as I mentioned in my review earlier this year, the game still very much feel like an early access title. There is tons of improvement needed to be made. The weapons, the animations feels a bit choppy. The maps are very colorful and bright, but at the same time way too big and way too cluttered. Very hard to see enemies. Initially the game had mixed reviews on Steam, but got a decent player count, about 5,000 plus. But right now it's only having about 50 people playing, so about 99% drop of player count. But I still believe the game can make a proper comeback with the full launch, with new stuff, new game modes, and more added features, which is something we have to wait and see. PlanetSide 2 was an awesome, massive MMO FPS that was launched way back in 2012, and it was an absolute beast of a game back then. The game is all about this massive continent-sized battle with hundreds, even thousands of players duking around in the same server. You could roll into war zones with infantry, tanks, aircrafts, and squad up with your faction to conquer the territory. And the game made headlines and even set the world record for the most players in an online FPS battle. But of course now in 2025, the game is old and the graphics and the mechanics mechanics aren't what they used to be. The graphical fidelity and the gameplay smoothed out by modern titles made it feel a bit outdated. The update still comes around here and there, but not at the pace or the scope fans hope. New players also struggle with the learning curve, so it's not exactly beginner friendly, but I would say for a decade-old game, the game is still doing pretty well on Steam, having around 700-800 concurrent play count right now. The glory days are long behind it, but the battlefield isn't completely empty. You can still jump in and enjoy this absolute masterpiece of a game. How many of you guys remember this Battle Royale game called Vampire the Masquerade Bloodhunt? So it's a free-to-play Battle Royale game initially launched back in 2022. So you can basically pick a vampire character and run around rooftops, trees, use guns, supernatural powers, and try to survive against both other players and vampire hunters. The game attracted a massive player count at launch, and it stood out because of that vampire theme. It was a very polished and a demanding title, but underneath everything, the game had very solid mechanics, fun gunplay, and it actually felt fresh in this overcrowded battle royale space. But unfortunately, the buzz didn't last long. By the mid-2023, the developer Sharkmob basically stopped working on the game. They said that the player numbers weren't high enough to justify more updates, so they basically shifted into maintaining the game, the general bug fixes, balancing problems, and cheaters. You can still download and play the game in 2025, but unfortunately there's only few hundred people playing at the moment. Next up, we got Lost Light, a free-to-play survival looter shooter by NetEase that officially dropped back in 2022. Gameplay-wise, it's basically a Tarkov-like extraction shooter. You loot weapons and mods, manage your loadout, and try to survive PvP and PvE scenarios. The game stands out because of its realistic weapon customization, base building, and social mechanics. And Lost Light is no doubt one of the most popular looter shooters on mobile. It actually pulled over 4 million beta players and quickly became top 30 free games on Google Play. But on the PC side of things, it wasn't really doing that well. And fast forward to 2025, now the game is just hanging on its last breath, only have about 300 concurrent players on Steam. It's honestly not a game that I personally spend a lot of time on. I remember a lot of you guys request me to check this game out, but nowadays in 2025, there's obviously a lot better options out there, but technically you can still download and play the game. Moving on to an extremely cool free-to-play tactical shooter on Steam that's going on a lot of people's radar right now, and it's a game called Polygon. A lot of you guys who are familiar with my content already know what Polygon is all about. It's a tactical, team-based, battlefield-style first-person shooter launched onto early access back in March 2020. It had fun, fast-paced gunplay with a touch of realism, tons of weapons to unlock and customize, also a solid collection of maps to choose from. But the thing about Polygon is that the game is still on early access on Steam after more than 5 years of launch. The biggest letdown for me about the Polygon is the lack of content, especially the lack of game modes, new features, new maps, especially some basic features like voice chat and squad option was lacking, so adding new content became a kind of a pain for the developers. It honestly wasn't a massive title at launch. The game peaked at about 1,200 players, but due to those lack of updates, slow content releases, the overall play count kind of gradually decreased. Now the game is just hovering around 200 and 250 daily concurrent players. It is kind of disappointing because the game is actually super fun to play. Hopefully they will come up with more updates and more features, possibly a full release in near future. Totally Accurate Battlegrounds, also known as TAPG, is a hilarious physics-driven free-to-play battle royale originally launched back in 2018 as a kind of a spin-off parody version of PUBG and Fortnite. And the moment it dropped, it was actually free for the first 100 hours. It got that wacky ragdoll physics, animations, and a crazy amount of weapons. Even though the game launched as an April Fool joke, it became very popular, nearly peaking 30,000 concurrent players back in 2018. But as everyone eventually moved on, TAPG couldn't sustain its buzz, and the developers admit that they weren't going to pour full-time resource into it since their main focus on their other project, which is Totally Accurate Battle Simulator. And back in 2022, they also announced there would be no any content updates for the game. And I actually remember playing this game with my friends when the game launched as a free-to-play title, and it was actually surprisingly fun to play. Thankfully, you can still download and play the game. Nowadays, the game just hovering around 250 concurrent players on Steam. Next up, we got Rogue Company, launched onto open beta back in 2022, but it had actually been accessible since late 2020. It's a free-to-play third-person tactical hero shooter that had a pretty successful launch, I would say. It brought some serious hype thanks to slick gunplay, character-based abilities, and objective-driven match types. Plus, it supported cross-play and cross-progression across consoles and PCs, which made it super easy to hop in with friends. But as the time went on, the game sort of faded away, updates became spare, and didn't keep up with the bigger shooter games on the market. The player base kind of gradually dwindled down, and today, if you fire up the game on Steam, it is far emptier than it used to be. Right now, it's just hovering around 250 daily concurrent players. Shatterline was no doubt one of my favorite free-to-play shooters to play back in 2022. It launched into early access on Steam with the tactical PvP mods like Conquest, Escort, plus cool roguelike co-op mode called Expedition. It got sick gameplay, nice weapon customization, and also weekly updates that had people hyped and coming back. It peaked over 21,000 concurrent players on Steam back in 2022, which was a very solid start for a free-to-play indie shooter like this. But things took a very bad turn around mid-2024. The developers announced at the end of its Steam early access run, pulling the plug on in-game purchases and preparing for a full release, and short after it quietly dropped off Steam and relaunched on Epic Games Store, but this time not as a free-to-play title. Instead, it became a $5 paid game and started integrating optional NFTs and blockchain features that nobody cared about. And that move pisses off a lot of original fans, including myself, and we all kind of moved on and didn't really care about Shatterline anymore. And fast forward to 2025, there's basically zero people playing at the moment on Steam. It's still a $5 game, but who would want to spend money on a game that nobody is playing? This is a prime example of how you can actually ruin a free-to-play game, adding bunch of those NFTs, blockchain crap that nobody cares about. But all in all, it was actually a pretty fun game with very solid mechanics, gunplay, tons of game modes. I personally had so much fun playing. I know some of you guys already played the game at the time. But anyway guys, these are 10 awesome free shooter games that were once super popular but are basically forgotten in 2025. Which of these did you actually play back in the day? Drop a comment down below. I would love to know your thoughts down in the comment section. And if you enjoyed this trip down the memory lane, don't forget to like and subscribe for more free to play game coverage. I'll catch you guys soon in the next one. Stay safe.